And welcome back to Stories from the River. This is your host, Charlie Malouf, and I'm here virtually with Kellie Jones, a repeat guest here on Stories from the River. Kellie, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you for having me. I love being here.
We love having you. Well, hey, we're going to talk about the Global Leadership Summit. We're in the midst of our recap series, so let's get going.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
So Kellie, you are our Senior Manager of Retail Operations. You are back again. We think it's at least your fifth time on the podcast, but I think you're about to start getting ready to pass like some of the more frequent visitors like Manny and Heather and Stacy or Carl. You're getting up there on the visits now. We love having you.
It's always a good time. I enjoy it every single time that I get to be a participant. So
awesome. Well, I love that you're raising your hand. And today we're going to talk about Nick Saban's talk. He did a fireside chat with Paula Faris at the Global Leadership Summit. And so this episode will drop on Thursday, September 4th, and we're recording this on Tuesday, September 2nd. So just before we get right into talking about Coach Saban's talk, I mean, last week, we had quite a few of it, even just the last 2 weeks. Let's see, 2 weeks ago, we had our soiree on the 19th. You attended the Experts Soirée. What was how'd that go for you? Was that how many times have you attended the soiree?
3 or 4 times, I think I have, but it was beautiful. I loved the venue. The Memory Maker Experience team, like, they're just tremendous. Everything they do, I mean, they put their heart and soul in it, and it's gorgeous, and it's absolutely amazing. And it was just a really great night as well. A lot of fun, and just a lot of celebration. And it was just tremendous. Yeah, it sure was. And so you liked STK, the move to the STK Steakhouse uptown? Yes, I really did like it. I liked that venue. I liked that we had the patio space at the initial time. We could stand out there. You could sit. There were some seats in that as well if we wanted to. But just I really liked the atmosphere. Just being down there in downtown Charlotte and just being out there, it just was really nice. Yeah. The weather looked favorably upon us that day. Yes. And then we rolled straight from that 1 week later, and then we did our Columbia. And by the way, just a little teaser, we are going to have some episodes here on the podcast featuring the soiree. And then a week later, on the 26th of August, as we got into our Labor Day week, we kicked that off with our Columbia grand reopening ribbon cutting celebration. And my, oh my, what an amazing looking store transformation that has become. Talk about transformation. That store was incredible. So what was your take and experience? I know you've attended several of our ribbon cutting ceremonies. What was your take from that event? Yeah, another great event. I was glad to get to go because that store, I mean, I've seen the store from where it was from, still having the waterfall just a few months ago to where it is now. It is, oh my gosh, it is gorgeous. Just walking around, like I was so scared to touch anything because I was like, I don't want to mess it up because it just looked so pretty. Even on Saturday, I was like, oh my God, we have to fix every little pillow every time something gets moved because I'm like, we got to make it perfect again. And those events are just so great because you get to see so many different people from the company and everybody's just happy and it's just a pleasure to be there. I mean, I was really happy for Troy Walker, the general manager, and Lance and Brandon and Emily, our visual, and Dana, our district manager for the store, and Angel Hodges, the REM extraordinaire down there. Yes. I know you've worked with Angel for many years, and she does a great job. And for the Bloodline, and I just got to tell you, I mean, I didn't realize the fountain was still there up until just a few months ago. Yes. But I got to tell you, that store, I mean, that was one of the original Ashley Furniture home stores that was built by a different licensee, and then we took it over in December of 2008. And that store, kind of like when we took that market over and that store over during the Great Recession or the Great Financial Crisis, crossing over the Broad River, that kind of that helped us get our company name. So it's got origins in our company name, Broad River, then Furniture, now Broad River Retail, have its origins in growth into Columbia, South Carolina. But I got to tell you, that store just takes your breath away. When you walk in, I mean, to me, I don't know whether it takes your breath away or it's breathtaking, but it's just like,
Wow. It just kind of hits you up, right away. So that was cool. And you were there on Saturday. So how long were the lines of people waiting to get into the store? Was that I think I saw pictures. It was around the corner.
Yeah, it was a long line. I got there. It was about 8:45 when I walked in, and there was already a line forming, and we didn't open till 10. So, it was awesome. I mean, people, they were wanting to come in. They were wanting to do the rewards wall. It was really exciting. And then we got to do, we had the $2,000 gift card giveaway. And that was such a huge celebration. The guest was ecstatic. The team was excited. I'm getting chills now thinking about like the celebration of just how exciting it was. And, that guest, they felt like they really needed it, that boost. So
it's always awesome to give a guest a $2,000 shopping spree giveaway. Thursday we had another big event in Labor Day week, and I want to talk about Labor Day in a second. But we had the one we had been planning for all summer, Pioneering the Path, a Purpose 828 experience, and we had 2 keynote speakers that bookended the event, and then we had our opening tailgate. Then we had Kristen Hadeed, who wrote Permission to Screw Up, and then we had John Acuff, All It Takes Is a Goal, and he has written several New York Times bestsellers. And then we had 6 key workshops led by our own leaders, and then we had our kind of business plan competition. It was a pretty cool event. You got to hear both keynotes, did you not?
Yes, yeah, I got to experience both of those, which was really cool because I've read several of John Acuff's books, and I'm really excited. I got the new one, and then I'm already preparing for April when the procrastination one comes out. But I fangirled a little bit, I was really excited to get to meet him. So, and Kristen Hadeed, she was amazing too. I really enjoyed listening to her speak and getting to meet her. But obviously, like I said, I was a little fangirly over the other one.
And did you get your tracks, your soundtracks?
I did. Cards? I got the soundtrack cards. And then I actually got him to sign a couple of my books because I brought from home, and then I got the new book. So
that's so cool.
I was first in line to meet him too. I was like, get out of my way.
I love it. So, he's got a deck of 52 cards. We bought like over 100 of them. He brought them with him, and we dispersed those out. But here's one I like: Hills Pay the Bills. So, he had some great soundtrack cards, and these are just great reminders that you can tell yourself, throw shorter pity parties. That's a good one. So anyways, we encourage you to get the soundtracks deck of cards on John Acuff's website. I brought some other swag with me, from our soiree, and we'll talk about this. But how cool were these Experts cards, by the way? Did you get your deck of Experts cards? Yeah, the trading cards.
Yeah, they're very cool. I don't have too many of them, but I know one of my associate managers, he's collecting them all, and he's like, I got to get everybody's signature. He's like, I got to travel around. He's so excited. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got our trading cards with our experts and their lifetime stats. Mm-hmm. Kellie, you've been with us almost 10 years now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Time flies, because I may have guessed. I don't know. I remember when you hit 8, 7, and it's hard to keep up. So almost 10 years. But I bet if we put your lifetime stats, remember you started as an REC or an REM in Mooresville at the lake.
Well, I started in Mooresville. We didn't even start the REM program until about a little less than a year later. So
let me guess. You were a GSR?
I was a GSR. Yes.
A GSR. Okay. And then you became an REM?
Yes. Then I became an REM, and then a senior REM.
Yeah.
Then I got to help with launching Salesforce in the company and doing that. And then I moved into the role that I'm in now.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we've gotten through some banter. So I enjoyed getting caught up. I guess I have one more thing. It is Tuesday. We're a little bit in a recovery state. We just completed, it was one of our biggest days. Was Labor Day yesterday our biggest day we've ever had? If not, our second biggest day we've ever had. But the week was just barely our second largest week we've ever had, second to Labor Day week of 2022, which was pandemic powered. So we're well on our way with our $272 million target for 2025. And we kicked off a new 95-day challenge that started on Friday of Labor Day after Purpose 828. So it started on 829, which will take us through December 1st. So we got a lot of goals, a lot of challenges, a lot of contests. We also had our tent pole contest, but the team is really fired up and really going after it. But I was so, interested and excited and glad that you raised your hand for, hey, the GLS Leadership Recap Series, which we're in you just had our last one that published on Tuesday, which was with, kind of the reductive mindset, less is more with Juliet Funt, taking a minute to think and cutting away some of the krill and letting the tuna stay, focusing on the big things so that you can just kind of deprioritize or prioritize and get some of the small things away so you can kind of do more with less. And you did that episode with Carl, but I know you love content. I see all your books behind you, and you referenced those in the last episode. But now it's a Nick Saban episode, and he talked at the Global Leadership Summit. And I think this was his first time to speak, and you raised your hand. But I would have expected maybe a college football fan or someone who was familiar with Coach Saban. I know Coach Stacy loves Coach Saban and what he represents. Kellie, what is your experience and passion for college football?
It's pretty limited. I didn't even know that Nick Saban was involved with football. I knew he was a coach, but I didn't know what sport he coached until that we got to sit there and listen to him. So I was like, oh, that makes sense now. I was like, oh, I've heard of Alabama. Like, I just was like, okay, this all like connected for me. But yeah, I'm not a huge sports person. I do enjoy watching live sports, but I don't follow anybody. I don't do any of that. I just, yeah.
And that's not a judgment. I just find it so interesting that, someone who is so famous for being arguably if not the modern day greatest college football coach of all time, he's at a leadership summit and his content and what he said resonated so deeply with you that you're like, oh, I want to talk about that. So let's get right into it. Paula Faris had a kind of a fireside chat or an interview with Coach Saban that he's just known as Coach. And he's been retired for a couple of years now. And actually, they're missing him because Alabama just lost to Stacy's and Steve Ramjett's and Chris Schoenfeld's Florida State Seminoles in a big upset this past weekend. But what were your takeaways from Coach Saban's talk? What were some of the themes that stood out to you?
Yeah, so the very first thing that they talked about was routine and how he lives with his routine every single day, and about eating the same breakfast and lunch daily to that point, which was incredible for me because I'm like, I don't know if I could ever do that because I have to mix it up. I need some variety. But just being in that routine gives him, and allows him to focus on other things and that because he knows, okay, lunch is this is what I'm going to do. So that way you can just think about other things that are more important, so. Yeah. I really liked that idea of routine, and I'm a creature of habit myself. I love routines, building them for myself, and helping my team build their routines, because a lot of what we do in the retail operations world, we do need to have very consistent routines. So that just really spoke to me of like being in that routine, but also learning to be a little bit flexible because, we live in retail. We have to be flexible. We have to have some sort of routine, but we have to live with the uncertainty of like what's going to happen today. And be flexible to handle whatever that situation is. So it just literally was like, we're talking to you, Kellie, when he mentioned that. So
yeah, he gets made fun of for eating the same breakfast, but he says, nope. He said, I love these. I'm just reading my notes. People function well when you have a good routine. And he said, to your point, if you're not flexible, you don't learn how to adapt. And that's the thing about it. People look at him and say, oh, he's just so rigid and does the same thing. No, he actually, later in his career, Kellie, some of the, when they started having what's called like the West Coast offense and things like that, he really brought in coaches and really adapted his mindset a lot. He talks a lot about self-assessment in his talk. But he said the way things change so dramatically, you have to have a system where you can evaluate what you're doing and then have the opportunity to adapt and grow so that you continue to improve and progress. And so he said you need to have a system where you can review what you're doing. I'm just reading through my notes. So I think what your point is, a routine helps you have a really good foundation with which you can then adapt and self-assess as needed. Okay.
Yes.
Transitioning from routines, then what was one of your next takeaways?
Yeah. So my next thing was, one thing that he said was, that he focuses on now is more of the transformational leadership and really, helping his team, develop their own vision. Like each person has their own vision. So he said one of the things, the exact quote was, "There's no I in team, but there is in win." And the I stands for individual. So really digging into the individuals and like, what does that person want in life? Not just for right now, but where do you want to grow to? What do you want to do? And then helping them come up with a plan to get them there, because, you can't just sit here and do nothing. If you want to do that, something else, you have to prepare and all that. You've got to win now, but you also have to prepare to win later.
They started talking about the process, and he's been accused of being like a machine. It's just the process. Once you put it into Alabama, it's just this machinery and it's a process. And he really kind of lets you kind of look under the hood, so to speak, to kind of unpack his process. And he doesn't use the exact same words as like speakers we might hear about, like Simon Sinek that says start with why, and other popular leadership thinkers or speakers, but he talks thematically about some of the same things. So, in terms of the process, and I'm going to just go upstream just a little bit, and I'm going to end up at what you're talking about with the I in individual. He said, the process, I'm going to read my notes here, is basically a definition of what you have to do to accomplish the goals that you have. Many people look at the outcome, and what the process does is make you continue to focus on the things that you need to do to get the outcome. So again, in Keith Jones' episode here, he said, marry the results, divorce the outcome. And he says, I don't want to be a results-oriented coach or leader. I want to be a process-oriented coach or leader. So don't worry about what the end result is. Worry about what you have to do. And so to your point, about the I and individual, he's getting down to like what motivates you and how you want to achieve your goals. And in order to do that, if everyone does that individually, you can do that collectively. So he kind of lays out a framework for doing that. I love what he said here. The process makes you focus on the things you need to do to achieve the outcome. And then he says, how does he develop the individuals on the team? So he says, to your point, he's just asked them. He asked every incoming freshman, he said, what do you want to accomplish here? What are your goals? And he says, and when they say what their goals are, he says, do you know what that entails? He's talking about, do you know what it's going to be required? It's one thing to say, I want to do all these things. Do you know what the work that's going to be required to go from A to B? And he says, that's the process, the definition of what you need to do to accomplish your goals. And then he says, asking him that question, this is what I like. It invites him to have a conversation with, if you told me what your goals were, Kellie, I would then be able to go to you and say, well, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing against your goals? How are you making progress on your goals? And based off what they said, he said he can ask them why. And he says asking them why is because he wants them to be able to learn how to self-assess. So anyways, I like that part about because he said you can never be able to improve if you don't know how to self-assess. That to me, that's wisdom. Yeah. It's like Juliet Funt talked about, like in the Air Force and the Blue Angels, they do after action reviews and they assess kind of what worked, what didn't work, what they had to cut back. He talks about the same thing. You have to kind of be able to like, my goals I wanted to have, how am I doing on those, and what do I need to iterate?
So while you were talking all that, I just kept thinking, just to relate it back to like actual experience at Broad River, is in 2018, and when Renee Bradley took over the lake here in Mooresville, one of the things, like, we just established, this is the process, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to win just by doing this process. And we did, and we would win. And then some, and we'll talk more, I'm sure, here about complacency. Then we would get a little complacent with winning, and then suddenly we'd lose, and we'd be like, no, we got to go back. We got to go rethink, set it back up and start right back with that process. And that just made me think of that. And one of the, that was the big push that she had that just helped us win. So, I always think of that now, and anything that I do is like, oh, it's the process, not the result. Let's focus on the process and we'll get the result that we want.
So he's really known for the process. That's one of the things that Coach Saban is known for. And he kind of gets into like going into like you said, knowing individually kind of what makes you tick so that he can really coach you on how you're doing against your goals. And then get this ability to like be a self-learner, right? To self-assess. Kellie, do you have things that like you look at your own life or your career and you say, you know what, have you used that practice of self-assessing in your own life?
Yes, constantly. I feel like maybe I self-assess a little too often and too much, but I think we all do that to an extent. But yes, I try to do that take some time to myself, just really think about what are my goals? Where am I at on that? Have my goals change because, as you grow older, sometimes that happens. You grow older, things, different goals in life. My first goal when I was in elementary school was to be a teacher, and I'm not that now. So, obviously my goals have changed.
Yeah. So you course corrected and you self-assessed.
Yeah.
I love how valuable is it to have a coach that will help you do that? He's going to like understand he's really trying to get you to go be the best outcome and version of yourself. Yeah. Another thing is, okay, do you have the discipline to execute it every single day? He tries to live it out, right? We talked about he eats his same breakfast every day. And it really comes down to discipline is doing what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, the way it's supposed to get done, to do the right thing, the right way, the right time, all the time. I actually had to replay that like 10 times and keep making sure I got those notes because he's dropping wisdom, but he's doing it so quickly. He goes, discipline is doing what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, the way it's supposed to get done, and to do the right thing, the right way, the right time, all the time. He says self-discipline boils down to just two questions. And I've heard this before, I think probably from him. Can you make yourself do what you know you're supposed to do, and can you not do what you know you're not supposed to do? For me, it's can I not eat the desserts at the end of the night that I know I'm not supposed to do, but that I really want to do? So it's do versus not do. So I really love that about the self-discipline approach. Did that resonate with you at all?
Yeah. He mentioned like feeling versus choice, and that made me think of, so I have teenage nephews and nieces, and it made me think about conversations I have with them because they're like, well, I don't want to do something. Well, I was like, well, it's not about what you feel like you want to do, but where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? So, so it was, what do you need to do to reach your goal? Like you mentioned. And so that's the conversation I have with them all the time is like, I get it. Nobody wants to do some of this stuff from time to time, but sometimes it's what's needed to do. So for instance, you mentioned, the dessert after dinner. Well, I want to lose weight. So eating, what I did the other night, which was a slice of cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory, wasn't necessarily the best way to help me lose weight. So,
well, it's the feeling versus choice that you just hit on is something that's a great point that he said, because he said, that's the bridge. It's, are you going to do what you feel like doing? And he said, and this is why we all need a good coach in our lives, right? He said, can you choose to do the things or not do the things to accomplish your goals, to remove feeling? He said, don't get so overcome with circumstance. And I love he told the story about Chuck Pagano, who was the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. And he said, he gave this interview on CBS, and he says, I don't remember anything from the interview except he was the head coach and he was sick with cancer. And he said, his vision was to see his daughters grow up so that he can dance at their wedding. And his circumstance is that I have cancer. And he said his first thing is to create a process with every individual in the organization so they had something that they were trying to accomplish, that it was about them, that it came from them. And she asked, was that countercultural, not to focus on the outcome or not to focus on the results? And he wanted people to stay focused on what they can control on a day-to-day basis. And so we hear all these things about, don't worry about the circumstances. Like at retail, we have all kinds of circumstances. Just focus on the inputs, the C4 process, focus on what we can control, and let the results will take care of themselves.
Yep.
So he talks about standards, right? And the standard, the expectation they had to make a commitment to. But what was the quote about mediocre people and high achievers?
The mediocre people don't like the high achieving people and vice versa, basically, is, because if you're a high achiever, you don't like it when you have people on your team just doing the average or, and then it's the same way is that, if you have a team of mediocre people, then you have one high achiever, they're going to be like, oh, look at them, kind of just, and there's just that animosity there.
Yeah. He said, mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. And if you let these two things coexist in your organization, you're never going to have any togetherness and teamwork. And he said, he said he never had these signs like go win a championship, go win the SEC or the national championship. He just had a sign that said be a champion. And then he had these steps about being a champion. And one was, be a team. Yeah. Everybody accomplishes more as a team. And, and so that was part of it. And then he talked about, being positive regardless of your circumstance. And then accountability, the third part, be responsible for your own self-determination. And then the last one, being passionate, are you willing to do things you need to do in order to dominate the competition? He said, I call that passion. If you're willing to invest your time in something you have passion for, it will take a certain level of perseverance, perseverance to overcome adversity, and every obstacle creates an opportunity is what he said. So, those are some of the takeaways about the winning and being a champion. What else resonated with you?
Yeah, so just part of that at the end where you talked about the passion and the perseverance, and that one thing he said was never waste a failing. So it's always a learning moment. Like we're going to fail, but never waste it. Take something from it, learn from it, learn to do the best and take pride in your performance. And it's just, that resonated with me. I remember I wrote it down, circled it, highlighted it, and I was like, never waste a failing. Like, that's just a good way to think about that.
That quote alone, like we hear someone like John Maxwell say that all the time. Don't think about winning or losing, think about winning or learning. And here you have Nick Saban just saying it a little bit differently, right? But kind of the same, really the same sentiment.
Yeah, you hear it a lot, but just that phrasing for it just like really resonated with me. Like, that's a good way for me to think about it.
He talked about, there were a couple of times they had gone 19 games in a row and won. And he said, people were always willing to change and improve when they were humiliated. And so, because they had lost to teams they weren't supposed to, and nobody wants to be humiliated or be irrelevant, but if there's no learning from failure, it kills morale. So don't waste a failing. Because he said the more difficult thing is dealing with success. And I think you talked about complacency. Yeah. And he said success is not a continuum. It's temporary. So what resonated with you about complacency?
You can't get complacent when you're winning, because then you're just not, at that point in time, you're not going to continue to win, because other people are going to be like, they're going to strive to beat you now. So you're going to stay the same. And because you're complacent, you're like, we're happy here. But if we don't continue to grow and challenge ourselves and to do more, then, we're not going to be the number one anymore. So we're going to lose. And so that's not something I want to do. So I want to continue to grow and be better in that. So that's why I continue to challenge myself, continue to challenge my team, come up with new ideas, so that we can continue to grow as with the company in that.
Coach Stacy talks about, today's success is the biggest impediment to tomorrow's success. He may have gotten that from Saban. Really, he talked about when you have so much success, what it starts to do is it affects the process and your preparation and your willingness to continue to put in the work. I have a few things I wrote down here. He says complacency creates a blatant disregard for doing what's right. And he said, when you have success, you get complacent. You lose respect for what it takes to win. And he said, it affects your practice and preparation. He said, after you climb the mountain successfully, you become the mountain. He said when they won, I think it was the 2009 championship, and they went 15-0 and beat Texas or something for the national championship. They showed every kind of notch as a climbing the mountain. He goes, but now we've achieved success. We became the mountain. And he said, it's important to keep climbing, to keep growing, to keep progressing. He said, our society creates relief syndrome. When you create something of significance, you think you have the right to rest on your laurels. But he said he didn't have the syndrome. He talked about growing up and working for his dad at the service station. He goes, Yeah, I learned 3 things from my dad. He said one time he said he made fun of a hobo and his dad got on to him. I think he said that was like the last whooping he had from his dad. So he learned compassion for other people. He talked about accountability was the second thing he learned from his dad, because if he didn't do something right, his dad said, if you don't do it right the first time, how are you going to have time to go and do it again? So, and then he talked about, making sure you're doing the best to be the best that you can be, because he said his dad would always tell him, because he said after they would win, he had success in high school and they won all these games in a row, but his dad would always get on to him. And he said, Dad, what's going on? Are you ever going to be pleased? And he said, son, I'm not comparing you to, Joe Smith or Joe Schmo over here. I'm comparing you to who you can be, and are you doing your best? And it just made him realize about focusing on self-improvement and being the, it is, do have to balance that, not being too much in love with being a striver, but always being willing to say, hey, I think he looked at it more as, I don't want to be complacent and just like look at my success and just get lazy. I want to continue to do the process, to be a lifelong learner, to be on this lifelong journey of enjoying the process, enjoying, optimizing my God-given talents, abilities. And I think that's what I took away from it.
Yeah. I just remember this whole part was, that he talked about was, success is just a moment. Like, This is the moment we can celebrate right now, but tomorrow success was yesterday. Now we got to be successful today. So how are we going to do that today? So that's kind of like how I took it.
Okay. There's a couple books. So he wrote a book. We'll link to his leadership book. And they also opened up with a great video clip about what he accomplished at Alabama. We'll put that in the additional resources. But he also said, when he became kind of I know you wanted to hit on like this, transformational leader. He said a priest, because he grew up as a devout Catholic, and he said a priest gave him this book called The Road Less Traveled in 1986, gave it to him. And it was about a spiritual development, a positive energy, and a positive attitude book. And he said the first line in the book is, life is difficult. And it was just like how you think can affect how you stay positive. He said, like, we have 95,000 thoughts every day. 90% of those thoughts are reoccurring. And so it was all about like, I love that he got this book and it just affected his whole life. And a priest gave him this book about mindset.
And that he talked a lot about that when he's talking about being positive. And I've read a lot of other books too about what your thought is, what you're going to project and what you're going to receive too. So if you're giving positivity, thinking positive, positivity is going to happen. If you're negative, it's just everything's going to be negative.
Matter of fact, we just heard that from John Acuff last week when talking about goal setting. He said positivity has a high ROI. It's got a positive return on investment. So that was good. And then the first story he tells folks is about being the best. First speech at the beginning of every fall practice is the Martin Luther King Jr. street sweeper story. If you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you can be. And he said he told this camp at the beginning of camp every year for 17 years. If everyone focused on what they needed to be a champion, the results will take care of themselves. So, and if we have a team full of champions, we'll then have a championship. And he talked about the Ohio State story with because when he was coaching at Michigan State and they were going to lose, and he talked about don't worry about winning the game, worry about what you can control, and to focus on one play at a time. And he said they were 27-point underdogs at Ohio State, but they ended up beating them. And he said that's what changed him into being a transformational leader. Be someone that somebody can emulate, and players don't care what you know until they know that you care.
When you're being guided and all that and coached, is sometimes what you need to hear is most valuable, but not what you want to hear. So that was one of the things I wrote down too, is that sometimes when you're being coached, it's what you need to hear. And that's how you're really going to grow. It's not always going to be what you want to hear.
That came from his wife, Mrs. Terry.
Yeah. Is that where that came from? I'm not sure. I couldn't remember.
Yeah. That's what he said. He has learned about leadership from Mrs. Terry. And character as a person is defined by how you take praise and how you take criticism. And she told him what he needed to hear, not what he wanted to hear. And that changed him in his perception of how he needed to treat the media. But the funny story about Mickey Schaefer he said he grew up on the countryside and she was on the city side. And he knew from the first moment he saw her, he was in 7th grade, she was in 8th grade. He loved her, but she would never go out with him because she was dating this guy, Mickey Schaefer. And he said after they had this, the national championship in 2009, they threw this homecoming event for him and they were driving through and he saw the service station. And he said, I got to drive her by there. And he drove her by there and said, hey, that's your boy Mickey Schaefer's service station. See, if you'd stuck with him, that's where you would have ended up. And she goes, no, if I'd stuck with him, he would have been the head coach at the University of Alabama. Yeah. I thought that was so funny. But she's a powerhouse. And he talked about, mindset, staying focused on the things that you can control. And, he calls it avoiding rat poison, the external noise, and how challenging that is today he said, I don't know how you kids care so much about some man in his underwear, typing up insults to you on social media. He said he never really listened to the noise because he wanted to stay focused. Being able to stay focused on the things that you can control is important to staying focused on the task at hand. So he's very much a focus-driven, routine-based, standards, values-based leader. And so just the last thing about being a devout Catholic, Paula asked him, how has his faith guided and grounded him? And he said, hey, he said the first thing he would ask folks is about prayer. He said, well, how do you pray? And he said, listen, do you pray to, I think a priest or someone had told him this, do you pray to be blessed or do you pray to be a blessing? Mm-hmm. And he says, somebody else has to bless you. And he said, but you can be a blessing to everyone and everything that you touch. And so it's not what you get, it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. And so he talked about the last 2 days that he had just done. He said it was his 2 favorite days of the year because they just set up this Nick's Kids Foundation. I think they gave to like 100 plus nonprofit organizations and the Saban Center, the Children's Learning Center, and the money that they're raising there. And he said, the legacy, they'll forget about all the championships that we won and the records that we had here. But what they won't forget about the legacy that we leave behind is the kids who are still learning 25 years from now, in the Saban Center and helping kids, young kids and teachers and things of that nature. So he's very much a legacy minded. He's lived a wonderful life and he's still paying it forward. So I thought he was just a great inspirational leader. Yeah,
I was very impressed. Obviously, like I said, I had no idea really who he was, but everything he said resonated with me, and I took as many notes as I could.
Yeah, well, I think you got some great takeaways, and I think you might be a college football fan here moving forward.
We'll see. I might watch a game or two. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll leave the door open. Well, you listen. I watched college football for many years. I never heard all that wisdom from Nick Saban. So I'm glad that he's now being willing to step out at the Leadership Summit and share his insights with us. So that's all that we've got for this episode of the Global Leadership Summit recap series here on Stories from the River. We're right in the middle of this recap series. So we're going to continue recapping the rest of the speakers that we were able to enjoy back on August 7th and 8th. So, and then we've got several more series ahead from our soiree, from our grand reopening, from our Pioneering the Path, Purpose 828 event, and many, many more coming this fall to you. So thanks so much for joining us here on Stories from the River. We try to bring you the freshest content here in retail every Tuesday and Thursday, whether you're on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. Thanks so much. Hey, Kelly, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. To watch this episode, go to youtube.com/@storiesfromtheriver. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.